If you've walked down the Vegas Strip in the last 10 years, you've probably noticed all the dozens of showgirls loitering on the sidewalks in front of the casinos. They're everywhere, and they come in all shapes and sizes. Long ones, tall ones, short ones, brown ones, black ones, round ones, big ones, crazy ones. So why are all these showgirls out on the street instead of inside the casinos on stage? Well, newsflash, since Cirque du Soleil took over Vegas back in the 2000s, all the classic tits and feathers shows kinda went the way of the 99-cent steak and egg special. That is to say, they disappeared. As of 2023, only one variety show on the entire Vegas Strip features what most people think of when they think of showgirls, and even then, they're only a small part of the show. The reality is, tastes have changed, and Vegas tourists no longer want to see busty six-footers in high heels and 50-pound headdresses. Or at least that's what the casinos seem to think. The proliferation of quote-unquote showgirls on the street tells a different story. I say quote-unquote because these showgirls on the street aren't actually real showgirls, they're imposters. And I was one of them. Wonderhussy here, just hanging out in my dressing room at my Death Valley compound, reminiscing about my days as a fake Vegas showgirl. Showgirls have been on my mind the last couple days, ever since I started getting emails that another YouTuber was using images of me in my showgirl costume in the thumbnail for one of his videos. So I logged in to check it out, and it was actually pretty interesting. This guy, Say Hi to Matthew, hi Matthew, was in fact using photos of me in my showgirl costume in the thumbnail to a video he made on this very topic, fake showgirls on the Las Vegas Strip. In his video, he explains what all these showgirls are doing on the street, just like I'm doing in this video. The truth is, all the showgirls you see on the Strip today are freelance street performers, aka buskers. Busking is the technical term for someone who makes money performing on the street. You've probably seen them in big cities like New York, New Orleans, or Nashville. Typically, a busker has some kind of skill or talent. Usually it's music, but sometimes it's magic or acrobatics or even just standing still like a statue. Some of the best musicians I've ever heard were busking on the streets of Nashville. There's some amazing talent out there. And the way these people make money is they either have a tip bucket or they pass around a hat at the end of the act to collect donations from the people who've gathered to watch. Well, busking didn't catch on in Vegas until about 10 or 15 years ago, but when it did, it exploded. And in typical Vegas tradition, you don't even really need to have any skill or talent to be a successful busker. All you need is a sexy or outrageous costume, and people will pay to take photos with you. That's the beauty of a city full of drunk people. Seriously though, if you think about it, most Vegas tourists come to town with pockets full of cash, which they fully expect will be completely gone by the time they go home. So a certain canny segment of the Vegas population has figured out a way to help relieve them of that cash by busking in eye-catching outfits. I mean, seriously, as a woman, it's super easy. All you have to do is put on a revealing, over-the-top costume and go stand on a street corner in one of the tourist quarters, and you'll be busy posing for photos and collecting fat tips all night long. And I should know, 'cause I used to do it myself. When I lived in Vegas, back around the time the first buskers started appearing, I took note because as a freelance model, I was always looking for new ways to make a buck, and that seemed like a really good way. I mean, you work for yourself, you make your own hours, you're your own boss. Yeah, sure, you have to put up with being groped and leered at all day, but the trade-off is you get to be out in the fresh air on the glamorous Las Vegas Strip, or, if you're really lucky, on Fremont Street. So I went online and ordered a bunch of feathers and hot glue, and about $200 and 20 hours later, I had myself a beautiful Las Vegas showgirl costume. Not bad for being 10 years old, man. This glue really holds up. Woo woo! The only bummer was, by the time I finally finished my costume and went down to the strip to busk, there were already dozens of girls, most of which were better looking and had better costumes, and all of which had bigger boobs than me. Dope! But what's really interesting is, once busking finally did catch on in Vegas, there was a huge influx of street performers from Hollywood. Okay, I guess there was some crackdown on Hollywood Boulevard, where those guys who dress like Batman and Marilyn Monroe stand around in front of Grauman's Chinese Theater. Well, I guess the LAPD or the Hollywood City Council or somebody enacted some kind of measures that made busking more difficult and less lucrative in Hollywood. So a lot of those street performers moved to Vegas. I'm serious, there's people for whom busking is a full-time career worth moving to a whole nother city for. And at that time, there were no busking regulations in Vegas whatsoever. Added to the fact that the cost of living in Vegas is about 100 times lower than LA, and it made sense for these street performers to come flocking across the state line in droves. I mean, I heard stories of like 10 buskers bunking up in one apartment to save money and commuting back and forth on the weekends. It was insane. But it sucked for me because now all of a sudden my big idea of making easy money wasn't so easy anymore. So I had to go back to the drawing board, and I did. I went home and I thought about it. What else do Vegas tourists like besides showgirls? Weed! Ha ha ha. This was back around the time marijuana was first getting legalized, and everyone was abuzz. So I went back online and ordered more feathers and more hot glue and made Showgirl outfit 2.0. Mary Jane the Green Goddess. That's my private grow. It's extra dank. Oh gosh. I have such a can-of-toe in this outfit. Anyway, I busked in my Mary Jane costume for a few months with one of my neighbors, who was a full-time poker player slash busker by the name of Jay Joint. He'd made this giant fake joint costume that he used to go out in, and so we kind of made a natural pair. And then sometimes I would just go out on my own, and it was pretty good money. And it was all cash. Especially when I was working solo, I found guys were pretty generous with me. I mean, by that time, busking had been around long enough to where most people in Vegas understood that they were supposed to tip you in exchange for taking a picture with them, so you didn't even really have to hustle, which was a good thing because I'm a terrible hustler. I would just take a couple dollar bills and like stick them in my bra or something, and people got the idea and they were very generous. I would get 5s, even 10s, sometimes 20s. It really added up. But over time, I lost interest in busking altogether because it was really getting out of hand. I mean, aside from all these Hollywood refugees, then there was a bunch of otherwise unemployable Las Vegans who figured out there was money to be made, and it got to the point where the streets, and especially Fremont Street, were clogged with freaks wearing costumes. And again, I'm using air quotes because some of these costumes were pathetic. I mean, cheap, dingy, dirty dollar store crap. Some girls would just slap on a couple of pasties and a thong and call it a night. It was pretty chaotic. And unlike me, a lot of these buskers were very aggressive. They weren't afraid to hustle, so you really had to be careful. You just strike up a conversation with one of them, and next thing you know, you're being conned or shamed into giving them $20 or even $50. These people were relentless. And I know firsthand because I almost got into a fist fight with a busker one time. I went downtown to Fremont Street to busk one night, and I got into a argument where there's this little person, and I've talked about him in my videos before, a little person who dresses like a miniature Mr. T, and he's a friggin' asshole. Okay, I went downtown in my little outfit, and I found a spot, and I knew, like, even back then, you weren't supposed to stand in front of a casino, or you had to be so many feet away from a kiosk that's selling souvenirs. Like, they had certain little rules. And so I did. I found a spot, and I went and stood there, and next thing you know, here comes this little Mr. T. You can't stand there. What do you mean I can't stand here? I'm 50 feet from the casino opening. I'm 20 feet from the kiosk. I'm perfectly within my right. You can't stand there. That's my spot. Your spot? There's no assigned spots. It's a free-for-all. Well, there was no arguing with this guy. He kept yelling at me, and next thing you know, he called in these two girls. Okay, aside from showgirls, you've probably seen sexy cops busking on the Vegas Strip. There's a lot of these pairs of sexy cops, and again, I'm using air quotes because they're, well, I guess sexy is subjective. Anyway, he called over these two sexy cops that looked like they just got out of jail that morning. I didn't want to get beat up, so I just hung my head in shame and went home. Anyway, after that, I quit busking altogether and only wore my showgirl costumes for paid events. Stuff like marijuana festivals, dispensary grand openings, Super Bowl parties, trade shows, corporate events, stuff like that. And it's a good thing I quit busking when I did, because the sheer madness that was Vegas busking back in 2012 eventually led to a crackdown on busking there too. Whereas before there were absolutely no regulations on buskers, now you had to apply for a permit and stand in a certain assigned area for a set amount of time. Basically like working a shift. But that's on Fremont Street. The Las Vegas Strip, being a public thoroughfare, is a legally protected free speech zone, which means the city can't force performers to stand in little circles or work assigned shifts. The most casino security can do is force them to stand just across the property line, which is why you see so many showgirls standing on the sidewalks today. And all of that is basically what Say Hi to Matthew was talking about in his video, where he used the picture of me in this costume in the thumbnail. I think he was basically just warning tourists to be careful around these fake Vegas showgirls, because it's really easy to get sucked in and conned or shamed into giving them $50 or even $100 for a photo. It's really gross, it's really shameful, and it's very, very Vegas. So why am I not upset with Say Hi to Matthew using my image in this showgirl costume in the thumbnail to his video? Well, that's another interesting story. When I made this costume, I was working as a freelance model in Vegas, okay? Posing for amateur photographers, doing workshops at studios, stuff like that. And there was this one guy in town who had a really nice studio. Like, he would rent out his studio for these amateur photography workshops. And so I worked there a number of times. And one day after the shoot, he came up to me and was like, well, when are me and you gonna shoot together? And I was like, golly, the guy who owns this studio wants to do a shoot with me? I said, sure, I'd love to do a TF shoot with you. Okay, quick technical aside. In the modeling industry, TF stands for trade for. Like, there's a TFCD, trade for CD. In other words, the model shoots with the photographer. Neither one pays the other one. Just in exchange, the model will get pictures and the photographer will get free time working with the model. And then they can both use the images from that to book paid work. Well, I had just finished making this showgirl costume, and so I thought, oh, this would be the perfect opportunity to get some photos in the costume. And I had this one concept in particular I wanted to shoot, where I was, a showgirl sitting on the toilet with a martini. Kind of a weird, artsy, conceptual thing. That's the kind of stuff I was into. So we shot that, and we shot a bunch more, traditional poses. And then at the end of the shoot, he gave me a CD with the images on it as part of the deal. But what I didn't realize is that he was also gonna sell those images to a stock photo website. Okay, stock photography is basically copyright-free photos that you can pay to download and then use however you want. Like, there's these big libraries of royalty-free photos, like Shutterstock or whatever, these websites you go to, and you find the picture you want, and you pay $5 or $10, whatever it is, it's not much, and then you have the rights to use that picture however you want. And there's a bunch of different websites that sell stock photos, so you can actually make money selling pictures to them as a photographer. Well, I didn't know he was gonna do that, so when I started seeing my pictures pop up in all kinds of weird places all over the world, I was pretty surprised. I saw myself on the cover of a cheesy ebook. I saw myself on a game show. Someone from London sent me a picture of my ass on the front of a casino. And somebody from Washington State sent me a picture of me on a Rat Pack Tribute Act poster. I was a photo booth add-in. I'm on a bunch of commemorative Nevada magnets that are sold at gift shops at places like the Hoover Dam and the Reno Visitor Center. All over the place. My face was even on a giant banner at the convention center once. This was like a 50-foot long banner that was hanging over the trade show entrance, and I actually went to the convention center on the last day of the show to see if they would give it to me, because I knew they were just gonna throw it away anyway. But it was so complicated, like the Teamsters didn't have permission to take it down, or they didn't have a cherry picker high enough to get it down, and the boss was nowhere around, and well, I just had to give up, and now that 50-foot banner of me is in a landfill somewhere. And then there's my favorite one of all. I don't know if this is the Tel Aviv airport or what, but it's my legs on a banner with this Orthodox Jewish guy standing behind it, so it looks like a rabbi with sexy showgirl legs. Anyway, of course I thought all of this was very funny, but I was kind of curious how it happened because as far as I knew, I had just agreed to a trade shoot with this photographer and he was just going to use the photos to promote his business. My dumb ass hadn't read the release he had me sign before the shoot. Okay, I worked as a freelance model for 10 years and hardly any of the guys I worked with had me sign a release because most of them were just amateur hobbyists. They were just doing it as a hobby. They weren't planning to use the photos commercially. But this photographer, come to find out, was well known for selling his photos on stock photography websites. And if I bothered to read the dang release, I would have seen that he reserved the right to sell any images from the shoot to these stock photo sites. Well, my first reaction to all of this was kind of butthurt. Like, my feelings were hurt, you know? Like, I understand selling photos to a stock photography website, but I feel like it's ethical, or would be ethical, to at least pay the model a nominal fee, like $25 at least for her time, if you're going to be making money off the images. Especially considering I just spent 20 hours and $200 making this costume. But then again, it's not like he lied to me or anything. It was right there in the contract that I just didn't bother to read. I guess because I didn't feel like I needed to because we were friends. But the more places this photo popped up, the saltier I got, and I guess I took to Facebook to complain about it a lot back then because eventually one day he sent me an email, a pretty sharp email, saying something to the effect of, "I've made exactly $345.23 off of these photos and I'll gladly give you all of it if it'll just get you to shut up and stop complaining." Whew! That made me realize what an immature whiner I was being and that I really did need to shut up, and so I did. I never complained about it online again. I mean, like I said, it was my bad for not reading the damn release. I needed to shut up, stop complaining, and just look at it as another lesson learned in the game of life. And besides, I had a better idea. You know how they say, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em? Well, that's exactly what I decided to do. To be honest, I wasn't really that thrilled with the photos to begin with. I felt like he was very heavy-handed with the Photoshop. It looked like I was wearing a mask. I mean, they're not even that good of photos. I don't know why they show up everywhere. I mean, I'm not even built like a showgirl. I'm built like a penguin. I have short legs and no tits. I'm the last person on the face of this earth who should be the symbol of an iconic Vegas showgirl. I guess there's just no other good stock photos of showgirls out there? Anyway, whatever the case, it occurred to me that because those photos weren't even that good to begin with, I could just reshoot the whole set with a new, better photographer, and then list the new photos on a competing stock photo website. And these new photos would be so much better that they would steal all the business from the old photographer's photos, and me and the new photographer could split the take and get revenge. Haha. Right? Well, sort of. I ended up going to another photographer I knew who was perfectly capable and also happens to be one of the biggest trolls I've ever met. I mean, this guy is just a really argumentative shitster, so I figured he'd be on board with this plan, and he was 100%, so I spackled on my makeup and put on my costume and went over to his studio and reshot the whole set of photos, and then he listed them on a competing stock photo website. And wouldn't you know it, it wasn't long at all before one of the new photos showed up in a huge way. Okay, it was the day after the 2016 election, so everybody was spazzing out, but I didn't have time for any of that because my photo was on a billboard at the Vegas airport. That's right, some Chinese airline was announcing their first direct Vegas to Beijing flight, and their ad campaign was me in my showgirl costume from the second shoot, sort of copy and pasted next to a woman in a traditional Chinese ceremonial outfit. Like, I guess the Vegas showgirl outfit is the traditional ceremonial dress of America. I mean, the production values on this billboard are frankly piss poor. You can see where they even tried to Photoshop me cleavage. And golly, with an ad budget like that, I hate to see what their airplanes are made of. Probably cardboard. But it was pretty funny, and it was actually a lot of fun because for a while there, those billboards were all over town until finally the airline went out of business, or maybe US-Chinese relations just grew so frosty that there was no longer any need for a direct Vegas to Beijing flight. But the funniest part of all is the second photographer never cut me in on any of the money from those photos either. Joke's on me. Actually, by then, I didn't even care anymore. I had sort of already started retiring from modeling to go into YouTubing, and, well, like I said, the second photographer is a huge troll and a very argumentative person. I mean, I used to be friends with this dude on Facebook, and I've seen some of the things he would post, and you know what? He can just keep his $82. So anyway, that second photographer's photos were the ones used by Say Hi to Matthew in the thumbnail for his YouTube video. And that's why I didn't get my panties in a bunch when people started emailing me and tagging me in the comments saying, "Hey, Wonderhussy, some guy's using your photo without your permission. You better take him down." Well, no, it's a stock photo. He can do whatever he wants with it. In fact, Say Hi to Matthew himself was actually classy enough to message me on Instagram and ask like, "Oh, is it a problem that I'm using your image in my thumbnail? Should I take it down?" And I told him the same thing. Nah, brother, they're stock photos. They're copyright free. You bought them? You can do whatever you want with them. And honestly, I think the fact that he used my photo on a video about fake Vegas showgirls is actually supremely appropriate because I was a fake Vegas showgirl. And in fact, thanks to the proliferation of those stock photos, you might say I'm the fake Vegas showgirl of all time. How about that? Not bad for somebody who, as I mentioned, is short, flat-chested, and built like a penguin. I mean, showgirls are supposed to be tall, slender, leggy, and busty. So how the hell I ended up becoming the go-to fake Vegas showgirl, I will never understand in a million years. And that brings me to a final, somewhat delicate point. Some of these women standing on the street in showgirl costumes nowadays, well, they might be annoying and they might be aggressive, but I feel like their greatest sin is they're kind of making a mockery of what was once a very glamorous and highly specialized profession. Okay, back in the day, not just anyone could be a showgirl. It meant something to be a showgirl. You had to be born a certain way. You had to work very hard to maintain your appearance. You had to get weighed in every week and subject yourself to all kinds of humiliations. Hundreds of women auditioned for these shows, but only a select few made it, and I myself would never have cut it as a showgirl back in old Vegas, and that's okay. I accept that. That's just the way it was. The exclusivity of the showgirl is kind of what gave it its mystique. Showgirls weren't just average everyday women, they were icons and ambassadors of a Vegas fantasy. But if you look at some of the showgirls standing on the streets of Vegas today, well, it's kind of an embarrassment. I mean, anybody can buy a cheap feather boa and a sparkly bra and strap on a thong and go waddling down the strip. There's no standards anymore. I guess that's just sort of emblematic of the new Vegas. But I don't mean to disparage all the fake showgirls on the strip. Okay, I know a lot of them are aggressive and annoying, but a lot of them are just nice, clean college girls trying to pay their tuition without getting on the pole, if you know what I mean. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I'm just saying. And in their defense, well, they probably have to be kind of aggressive because they're getting leered at and groped all day, and well, last fall, a showgirl in front of the Wynn Hotel was even stabbed to death. I don't know the whole story, but apparently there was a group of showgirls working on the sidewalk in front of the Wynn, and some guy wanted to take a picture with him, and they didn't want to, and he just went bonkers and attacked him with a butcher knife, and he ended up killing one of them. And the weirdest part of all for me was I had just met her a few weeks prior at Burning Man, of all places. A mutual friend brought her into our camp and introduced her, and she was this beautiful, and she did look like a classic Vegas showgirl. She was tall, leggy, slender. Well, it was Burning Man, so she was wearing a blue wig. I don't know what color her hair was, but she was a gorgeous, gorgeous girl. And she was a nice girl. She was I think she was a kindergarten teacher. So she was just doing this to supplement her meager income as a teacher. And then what happens? Some lunatic that gets butthurt because she won't pose with him stabs her to death. But I guess that, too, is emblematic of the new Vegas. I mean, back in the heyday of classic Vegas, you never had to worry about getting stabbed walking down the strip. No, you only had to worry about getting stabbed if you were caught cheating at cards, and then they would probably just bust your thumbs with a hammer and stick your head in a vise anyway. The good old days. So, there you have it. The incredible, unbelievable true story of my short-lived career as a fake Vegas showgirl. Although I guess I technically shouldn't say short-lived because even 10 years later, those stock photos are still popping up all over the place. It's like I'm the eternal showgirl. You know, I might be getting older, and my ass may not be as perky as it once was, but those photos are forever, and I think that's kinda cool.